Thank you for finding your way here tonight. There's something I love about knowing you're out there in the dark, somewhere on the other side of all that distance, choosing to spend a quiet hour with old stories, with folklore and myth and the half-remembered things people used to believe. These stories from the thin places. So if you feel like it, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is where you are. And give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more deeply researched tales about witches and wild hunts, forgotten gods, and lost lore. When I sat down with this one, I thought I was going to be telling you a few spooky stories about sea serpents. What I found instead was something stranger and far more careful than that. A whole catalog of monsters, written down by a people who lived at the very edge of the habitable world, and who described the creatures in their dark seas and black lakes, not as fairy tales, but almost as natural history. Beasts with names and habits and rules. Beasts you could classify. Beasts whose flesh, the old books warn, would vanish from the cooking pot if you were foolish enough to try to eat them. And one of them, the greatest of them all, turns out to describe something real, something that no scientist would properly understand for another 700 years. Settle in and enjoy. It is late, and you are standing on a black beach at the far north of the world. The sand here is not gold, but volcanic, ground down from old lava, so dark it seems to swallow what little light is left. Behind you, the land rises into nothing you can see. No trees, because there are almost none on this island. Only moss and rock, and the long low shapes of mountains under a sky that, at this time of year, never fully goes dark and never fully grows light. In front of you is the sea, and the sea here is the thing that feeds you, and the thing that will most likely kill you, and you have known both of those facts since you were a child. You watch the water for a moment. Out past the breakers, something rolls, a long, slow, dark back, breaking the surface and sliding under again. A whale, probably. Almost certainly a whale. But you have grown up on this coast, and you know that not everything that looks like a whale is one, and you know that there are names for the things that are not, and you know, this is the important part, that you must not say those names out loud. Not here. Not with your feet this close to the water, because some of them are listening, and a name spoken at the sea's edge is an invitation. This is Iceland, and tonight we are going to walk through its bestiary, the beasts of its lakes, and its long shorelines, and its terrible, generous sea. We are going to meet the water horse that waits in the still pools, and the worm that grew in the cold lake until it could no longer be contained, and the shore thing that hauls itself up out of the surf at dusk. And then we are going to go out onto the water itself, where the real fear lived, and meet the evil whales, and the island that was not an island, and the greatest sea monster the medieval North could imagine, whose secret no one would guess until our own lifetimes. But first, it's worth understanding why this particular island grew such a particular crop of monsters. Because Iceland is young, one of the youngest pieces of land on Earth, still being made, still steaming and cracking and pouring out new rock. When the first settlers came, in long ships, a little over 1100 years ago, They arrived in a place with no human past at all, no ruins, no older people whose gods they could borrow or bury, just fire under the ground, ice on top of it, a sea full of food and drowning, and a darkness in winter that goes on and on and on. And these settlers did something unusual with the stories they made. We know this because, almost alone among the peoples of medieval Europe, the Icelanders wrote things down, obsessively, beautifully, at extraordinary length. The great sagas, those cool, clear, plain-spoken accounts of feuds and farms and voyages, are theirs. And centuries later, when a scholar named Jan Árnason set out to do for Iceland what the Brothers Grimm had done for Germany, he gathered the folk tales of the whole island into volumes, the monsters among them. So when we go looking for the beasts of Iceland, we are not scraping at silence the way we so often have to. We have the records. The Icelanders, bless them, took notes. And the notes have a flavor all their own. Where another culture might give you a vague and shapeless dread, the Icelandic sources give you something closer to a field guide. This creature lives in fresh water. That one only at the tide line. This whale can be told from that whale by the shape of its head, the sound of its cry, the color of the crest along its spine. There are rules for how each one hunts, and rules, crucially, for how you get away. It is the bestiary of a practical people, a people who needed their monsters to be survivable. Knowledge here was not decoration. Knowledge was the difference between coming home and not. So let us begin on the land, with the gentlest looking and one of the most treacherous of them all. Walk inland with me, away from the sea, to where the rivers slow and pool, and the water lies flat and gray and still. There is a horse standing at the edge of the water. It is a handsome animal, gray most often, though the old accounts allow for other colors, and it is standing quietly, patiently, as though it has wandered off from some nearby farm and is waiting, in the mild way of horses, for someone to come and claim it. On a cold evening, far from home, it is a welcome sight. A horse means a ride. A horse means you do not have to walk. But look at its hooves. Look carefully, because this is the one tell, the single detail that gives it away. The hooves are on backwards. The fronts of them face the way the tail should be. And if you see that, you must do nothing at all except very calmly walk away, because this is not a horse. This is the nykur, the water horse of Iceland. And everything about its gentleness is bait. Because the moment you climb onto its back, you will find you cannot get off again. Your hands, your legs, wherever you touch it, you stick fast. Held, the stories say, as if by glue. And the nykur, feeling you settle, will turn without hurry and walk into the water. And it will keep walking down the shelving bottom of the lake, into the cold and the green and the dark, with you fixed helplessly to its back, until the water closes over both your heads and does not give you back. It is a horrible death and a quiet one, and the Icelanders thought about it enough to work out an escape, because of course they did. The nykur has another name. It is sometimes called nenir, and it cannot bear to hear that name said aloud. Speak it. Say nenir. and the creature, in shame or in fury, will throw you from its back and bolt for the depths alone, a monster undone by a single word. You will notice, as we go tonight, how often that turns out to be the trick, that the danger and the cure are both, somehow, made of language. Stay near the water, but follow it east now, to a long, cold, gray-green lake called Lagarfljót, a real lake, which you can stand beside today, because something lives in it, and the story of how it got there is one of my favorites in all of Icelandic folklore. It begins, as the best of these do, with something small. A girl is given a ring of gold, and she is told, by whom the story doesn't quite say, that if she wants the gold to grow, to increase, to multiply into real wealth, she should take a tiny worm, a little heather snake from the moor, and lay it on top of the ring, and leave the two of them together. So she does. She puts the worm on the gold, and she shuts them away in her chest, and she waits for her fortune to grow. And when she comes back and opens the chest, she finds that something has indeed been growing, but it is not the gold. The gold is exactly as it was. It is the worm that has swollen, grown huge and coiled and dreadful, filling the chest, straining at the lid. Terrified, she snatches up the whole thing, worm and ring together, and hurls it into the lake, into Lagarfljót, to be rid of it. But you cannot unstart a thing like that. The worm went on growing, down in the cold water, year after year, until it was a monster, the Lagarfljót worm, Iceland's own lake serpent, its cousin to the creature people watch for at Loch Ness. It is said to surface sometimes, showing its humps above the water, or to lie along the bank, and people have reported it for a very long time. The oldest sighting written down in the records dates to the year 1345, nearly 7 centuries ago, and there are people on that lake who will tell you, calmly, that they have seen it in their own lifetimes. A small thing placed on top of a treasure, left alone in the dark to grow into something that can never be put back. There are worse ways to describe how a fear is born. Now come back to the coast with me, because in Iceland, the most uneasy ground of all is not the land and not the open sea. It is the line between them, the shore, the strip of black sand and weed and tide rack that belongs fully to neither world, wet at 1 hour and dry the next, the threshold where the sea comes up to touch the land. And thresholds, in folklore, are always where the strange things wait. Out of that surf, at dusk, comes the fjörulalli, the shore laddie. Picture it hauling itself up onto the sand in the last of the light. A low, heavy, four-legged thing, about the size of a small pony, but with stubby, stunted legs, so that it moves with a slow, dragging, laboring gait. It is shaggy, with a coarse brownish coat. Something, the description suggests, between a wolf and a beaver. And its hide is crusted with the sea, barnacles and mussels growing along its back, as though it has lain so long in the shallows that the shore itself has begun to colonize it. It leaves the water and lumbers up the beach, and it is hungry. Mostly they say it grazes, but not always. Some accounts have the fjörulalli taking sheep, and the darkest of them warn that it has a particular appetite for pregnant women, which tells you, I think, less about the creature than about the people who told the story, about how it must have felt to live on that exposed coast, where the sea could take anyone, and where the thing you feared most was harm coming to the most vulnerable among you, out at the lonely edge of the farm, at the lonely edge of the day. The shore laddie is fear with barnacles on it. It is the coast itself, risen up and walking. And the fjörulalli is not alone on that tide line. The same dark beaches gave Iceland the skeljaskrimsli, the shell monster, and if anything, it is the stranger of the two. Picture a heavy, four-legged animal about the size of a young bull or a big horse, hauling itself up out of the surf. But this one wears the sea like armor. Its whole body is plated in a thick, rattling coat of shells. Shells that scrape and clatter against one another as it moves, so that you might hear it in the dark long before you ever see it. It has a broad neck and heavy jaws, reddish eyes, and, some say, a faint cold glow leaking from its mouth out over the black sand. And it keeps a precise and unsettling calendar. The shell monster comes ashore on the dark, moonless nights of the deep northern winter, and often just before or just after a storm, as though it travels inside the weather itself. A thing you hear before you see, clad in the rattling debris of the shore, walking up the beach on the blackest nights of the year. The threshold, it seems, was never short of things to fear. And before we leave the land, there are two more I can't bear to leave out, because they are so strange and so specific, and because they come as a matched and sinister pair, the skoffín and the skuggabaldur. These two are unnatural in the most literal sense. They are crossings of creatures that should never have crossed. The skoffín is born of a fox father and a cat mother. The skuggabaldur, the name means something like shadow baldur, a shadow thing, is the other way round. A cat its father, a fox its mother, born wild, out in the country, where no one could find it and smother it at birth. And that detail matters, because the skoffín, born tame, could usually be caught and killed before it grew. But the skuggabaldur grew up out there in the dark, unwatched, and could not be controlled. What makes them so feared is the skoffín's gaze. Like the basilisk of older European lore, it kills with a look. And worse, the killing runs only one way and needs no cooperation from you at all. It does not matter whether you see it. What matters is whether it sees you. If its eyes find you first, you are simply dead. And it cannot be brought down by any ordinary means. A normal bullet will not touch it. The one thing that will kill it, the stories insist, is a silver ball with a cross marked upon it, fired, in some tellings, from below, so that you never have to meet its eyes. A monster that hunts by being looked at, killed only by silver and the sign of the cross. You can feel the long centuries of fear and faith pressed into a detail like that. So that is the land, the gentle horse that drowns you, the worm that outgrew its treasure, the barnacled thing on the shore, and the shadow cats with the killing stare. Strange company, but the Icelanders saved their deepest and most careful dread for the place they could not avoid, the place they had to go again and again to live. The sea. Stay with me. This is the part I most wanted to show you. because for an Icelander, the sea was not scenery. It was the road and the larder and the graveyard, all at once. You went out onto it in an open boat to bring back fish, because the fish were how your family lived through the winter, and a great many people who went out did not come back, and there was rarely a body and rarely an explanation. The sea simply took them, and when a thing takes people from you, regularly, invisibly, and gives no reason, the mind reaches for a reason. It gives the taking a shape, and the shapes the Icelanders gave it were the ilveli, the evil whales. This is the heart of the bestiary, and the part that I find genuinely remarkable because it is so organized. The ilveli are not one monster. They are a whole category, a dark mirror of the ordinary, edible, useful whales. And the old sources distinguish them as precisely as a naturalist would distinguish species, because telling them apart could save your life. They share certain laws. They are wholly evil and live, the accounts say, only to kill, to crush boats and drown and devour the people in them. Their flesh is not food. Cook it, and it will vanish from the pot, and eating it was actually forbidden by law. And this is the rule you must never forget. They hear their own names. Say the name of an evil whale while you are out on the water, and it will know, and it will come. So sailors never said them. They spoke instead in euphemisms, in nicknames, and roundabout phrases, the way you might avoid saying the name of a sickness in a quiet house. To name the monster was to summon it. Let me introduce you to 3 of them, carefully, here on dry land, where it is safe to do so. The first and most dreaded is the hrosvalur, the horse whale, and it earns the name. It has a head that is somehow equine, horse-like, and a long mane of red along its neck, and a tail like a horse's tail, and, most unnerving of all, a cry like a horse neighing, out there in the fog where no horse could be. It is enormous, the accounts ranging wildly from something the length of a few boats to something the length of a ship and far beyond. And it has huge, staring eyes, so much so that it picked up a Latin nickname from the old scholars, monoculus, the one-eyed. And what it loves, what it lives for, is to throw its vast body up and over onto a boat, and smash it and take everyone down. Imagine being in that boat. Imagine the fog and the neigh and the dark shape rising. The second is the Royd Kembinger, the red comb or red crest, named for the livid red ridge running along its back. Raised, the description suggests, when it is roused. It is reckoned among the very cruelest of all the evil whales, the equal of the horse whale in malice, and it works the same horror, the rush, the rise, the broken hull. And the third is the stuckle, which means simply the jumper, and it does exactly what its name says. It hurls itself clear of the water and comes down on top of boats from above, crushing them under its falling weight. There is something almost unbearable in how plain that is. A people watched the sea and lost their fathers and sons and brothers to it, and out of the watching built a careful taxonomy of the precise ways a thing might come up from below or down from above to kill a boat full of men. The evil whales are grief, organized. They are a fishing community's attempt to give a name and a shape, and above all, a set of rules to the thing that kept emptying their boats. There is one more of the evil whales I want you to meet, because it is the strangest of them, and because it begins to carry us towards something larger. It is called the skutumotur, the skate mother, the great ancestral mother of all the skates, and she is monstrous. Imagine the flat, winged, gliding shape of a skate or a ray, and now imagine it swollen to the size of an island, lying just beneath the surface, its broad back looking for all the world like a low bank of mud or weed. She trails, the old accounts say, 9 long tails behind her, and like all her evil kin, she is poisoned to eat. But it is that island back I want you to hold on to. The vast flat creature, mistaken for a harmless patch of ground in the water, because it is the bridge to the greatest beasts of all. In the Icelandic Sea, you see, the most dangerous monsters were the ones that had stopped looking like monsters and started looking like land. But the Icelandic Sea held creatures even greater than the evil whales, beasts so vast they stopped being animals at all and became, in a sense, geography. And to meet the first of them, you have to imagine making a landfall. You have been at sea a long time, and at last, ahead, you see it, an island, low and dark and welcome, with a back of heather and weed, the kind of small, lonely scary these northern waters are full of. You bring the boat in. You step out onto solid ground, grateful for it. You light a fire, perhaps, to cook a meal on land for the first time in days. And the ground moves. Because it was never an island, it was the lingbakur, the heatherback, the largest of all the whales, so huge and so still that weed and heather have taken root on the great expanse of its back, so that it lies in the sea, looking for all the world like a low green island, and waits. And when the unlucky crew has landed and lit their fire and let themselves believe in solid ground, it feels them and it sinks. Down it goes deliberately, dragging the heather and the fire and the men down with it into the water, and the island that was never an island simply is not there anymore. This is the monster from the old Icelandic tale of Urvar Odur, Arrow Odd, and it is one of the oldest and most haunting ideas in all of sea lore. The trap that looks exactly like a refuge, the safe place that is the danger. There is hardly a deeper fear than that. And then there is the greatest of them all, the hafgúfa, the sea mist, the sea steam. And to find the fullest account of it, we go to a remarkable book written in the 13th century, a Norwegian work called The King's Mirror, the Konungs Skuggsjó, composed as a kind of education for a prince, a learned man in the service of the king, setting down what was known of the world and its wonders. And among the natural wonders of the Northern Ocean, he describes the hafgúfa, and he is careful about it, and a little awed. The hafgúfa, he says, is the greatest monster in all the sea. It is so large that sailors mistake it too for land, for islands, or for a line of rocks and reefs out in the open water where no rocks should be. And he reports a belief that I have never been able to forget, that there are only ever 2 hafgúfa in all the world, and that they cannot breed or do not, so that their number never grows and never falls. 2 enormous, ancient, solitary creatures, sharing the whole ocean between them for all time. And the way it feeds is the strangest detail of all. The hafgúfa, the old book says, will give a great belch, bringing up a gush of food and a vast quantity of fish, and the smaller fish of the sea come crowding in, swarming to feed on what it has disgorged. And the hafgúfa lies still, with its huge mouth open, looking like nothing more than an island or a channel between two shores. And when its mouth is full, when enough fish have gathered, trusting in the calm and the plenty, it closes that mouth and swallows them all. Now, hold that picture, because here is the turn, and it is the kind of turn I live for. For centuries, that was filed away as exactly what it sounds like. A tall tale, a sailor's exaggeration, a medieval fancy about a monster so big it could be mistaken for an island. And then, only in the last few years, in our own time, marine biologists watching real whales, humpbacks, and others documented something they had not properly described before. The whales were hanging motionless at the surface, jaws held wide open, simply waiting while fish gathered inside the open mouth, drawn in, and then closing the trap. They named it trap feeding, a real behavior of real animals captured on real cameras in the 21st century. It is almost exactly the hafgúfa, the stillness, the open mouth mistaken for calm water, the fish drawn into their own undoing, which means that the medieval scribe of the King's Mirror, copying down what northern sailors had told him about the greatest monster in the sea, was very likely recording, without knowing it, dressed in the language of marvels, a genuine observation of how certain whales actually feed, 700 years before science arrived at the same picture. The monster was real. We just had to grow up enough to recognize its face. And that, I think, is the thread that runs through this whole strange catalog, and the reason I find Iceland's monsters so much more moving than frightening. These were not idle nightmares. They were a way of knowing a world that was genuinely, constantly dangerous. The backward hoofed horse is a warning about deep, still water that will pull you down. The evil whales are the shape grief takes when the sea keeps emptying your boats. The island that sinks is the hard, true wisdom that the most welcome-looking refuge can be the trap that kills you. And the hafgúfa, the greatest monster of all, turns out to be a real animal, watched closely by clever people and remembered faithfully for centuries until the rest of us caught up. The Icelanders were not being childish. They were paying attention to the lakes and the shore, and above all to that enormous, beautiful, lethal sea. And they were writing down what they saw in the only language they had for it. That, in the end, is what I keep coming back to about this island at the edge of the map. Iceland is a young place, and a raw one, a place still visibly being made, where the rock is new and the fire is close under your feet, and the sea is always, always just there. And on ground like that, the wall the rest of us imagine between the ordinary world and the other, older one underneath it, never quite set hard. It stayed thin, thin enough that a horse by a pool might not be a horse, thin enough that an island might open its eyes, a thin place in the truest sense, where the world you can see and the world you can only fear lie close enough together to touch. At the tide line, in the fog, in the cold green dark beneath a still gray lake. And now there is nothing more for you to do tonight. The beasts can stay where they are. The water horse out at its pool, the worm coiled in its lake, the evil whales far out under the fog, the two great hafgúfa drifting somewhere in the dark of the open ocean, as they always have and always will, whether anyone is watching or not. You don't have to keep listening. You don't have to stay awake. You are warm, and the sea is very far away, and there is nothing on the shore tonight but the tide coming in and going out, and going in and going out. Let it all grow quiet now, and let yourself sink down, gently, into sleep. Thank you for spending this little stretch of the night with me, here at the edge of the world. Sleep well, and if in your dreams you find yourself standing on a black beach watching something roll in the water beyond the breakers, do yourself a kindness and don't say its name. Good night.